Good morning. My name is Katie Hay, and I serve as the clerk on your DuPage UU Church Board of Trustees. We want to welcome everyone this morning to our open and inclusive virtual community. As Unitarian Universalists, we hold that there are many spiritual paths to truth and meaning, and pledge to support one another as we explore these paths. We are so glad you were able to find us and join us for our live stream service today. Please check the church website at www.dupageuchurch.org for updates. If you search under DuPage UU Church on Facebook, you will find a number of ways to be in community with us as well. Make sure I get this right. Join us for coffee. Please join us today for virtual coffee hour after the service. The Zoom link is in the order of service and on the members tab of our website. You may join us around 11:30 a.m. and at 11:45 we will break into small groups of 4 or 5 people chosen at random. Chat with old friends or make new ones. We hope to see you there.
We bring ourselves as we are, accepting each other for who we are, calling each other to be what we may yet become. We call each other and ourselves to vision and action, nurture ourselves, nurture each other, challenge ourselves, challenge each other, make room for those who would join us. Enjoy beauty, explore meaning, find purpose. And as we light the chalice flame, these words by Napoleon Lovely, adapted by Charles Howe. We light this chalice to affirm that new light is ever waiting to break through to enlighten our ways, that new truth is ever waiting to break through to illumine our minds, and that new love is ever waiting to break through to warm our hearts. May we be open to this light and to the rich possibilities that it brings us. Our opening hymn is number 360, Here We Have Gathered.
Who seek here find a kindly word.
Please join me in our spoken affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
It is time to gather. We come to church to celebrate, to learn, to make friends, and to be of service. We come to explore life's ancient questions. Who are we? Where did we come from? What happens when we die? How shall we live our lives? We come to church to hear stories, to light candles, to have a moment of quiet, to sing a song, and to notice the wonder and mysteries of the world. We come to church to be together in a loving, caring community, young and old together. When we come to church, we make promises to each other, spoken and unspoken. These promises are sometimes called a covenant. A covenant describes how we live with one another, how we treat each other, what we will do to create a safe and sacred space where all may learn and grow. Our covenant in this church is grounded in our 7 Unitarian Universalist principles. 1, we promise that each and every person is important. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect, to have a chance to share, to be heard, to be included in the day's activities at church. 2, we promise that all people should be treated fairly and kindly. This means everyone is welcome at church. It means everyone, no matter what their age or sex, race, abilities, or differences, they deserve to be treated fairly and with kindness. 3, we promise that we encourage one another and learn together. Church is a place for fun and friendship, for learning and service. This means we need to listen to our teachers and one another, to participate in group activities to the best of our abilities, to help someone who is new or struggling, and to share what we're thinking or feeling. 4, we promise that each person must be free to search for what is true and right in life. This means everyone is encouraged to share their own thoughts and feelings without fear of being laughed at or criticized. It means activities will be planned at church that are varied, that appeal to different people for different reasons. 5, we promise that all persons should have a say about the things that concern them. It means all of us, young and old, need to listen to one another, ask for suggestions and advice, and work together to make church a safe and special place. 6, we believe in working for a peaceful, fair, and free world. This means we settle our disagreements in honest, caring, peaceful ways at church. And 7, we believe in caring for our planet Earth, the home we share with all living things. This means we enjoy our beautiful church, the buildings and the grounds, and all the creatures who share this space with us. It means we help with cleanup on Sunday mornings and after special activities. It means we clean up our messes, don't waste food or supplies, and recycle whatever we can. Living our UU principles in our daily lives, at church and at home, can be hard work. All of us, young and old, will make mistakes at times. We'll fail to live up to the promises we have made to one another. And at those times, it is important for us to talk honestly, with respect and love, to get help from someone we trust, to listen to one another, to apologize and to make amends, to explore what we can do differently next time. And in this way, we learn to grow. We learn and grow. And in this way, we keep our church a safe and special place. In this way, we make a difference in the world.
Please join us in our song affirmation.
We hold each other in our hearts and minds with all our joys and all our sorrows. We remember those who are experiencing losses of various kinds and those facing health challenges. We are aware that many are faced with heightened difficulties presented by these times that continue to be challenging for all. Even when the cares of the world weigh on us, may we find joy in our connections with each other and in the pleasures that life holds. Let us care for one another and for ourselves in all the ways we can. As we hold each other in our hearts and minds with all our joys and all our sorrows, whether spoken or unspoken, let's take a moment to be quiet together. The words of our meditation are by Maureen Kaloran. Here we are gathered, called by our sense of urgency or duty or the longing for community, called to be together on this day. Here we are gathered, called to hold ourselves accountable to our values, to remind ourselves of those hopes and dreams and possibilities which sometimes in the rough and tumble world can be hard to hold on to. Here we are gathered, called to do our part in weaving a web of human community. Here, some of us have come in pain, and in the complexities of community, it is right that some have come with joy bubbling in their heart. May we rejoice together, remembering the wisdom that says joys are multiplied and sorrows halved when shared. May we remember gratitude for warmth, thankfulness for sunshine, appreciation for the simple tastes of whatever food our lives and bodies let us choose. Here in this space which we create together, even though we are physically distant from each other, we are called to weave the web of human community.
Our special collection recipient in August is the Animal Rescue Foundation, a no-kill, all-volunteer, foster-based organization dedicated to rescuing and rehoming homeless dogs and cats. Donations to support the work of DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church are gratefully given and received. Our reading this morning is from Myths of Time and History by Alice Blair Wesley. Individual members of a coherent free church may be ever so singular and diverse, young or old, rich or poor, famous or little known, little schooled or many degreed, liking Bach or rock or both, prayers or atheists, of any race, of many backgrounds, management or labor, or changing degrees of these at different times. The more singular and diverse, the better. Individual members of a coherent free church may position themselves in any number of different patterns of office or ceremony or ad hoc committee or study group for different purposes at different times. Picture us in shifting lateral designs without hierarchy. We mean to have varying, not rigid, forms of authority. But if the whole has integrity, the free church coheres, howsoever flexibly around a center. So what is the center of the free church? And by what power are its individual members held together? What gives the free church its integrity? The center of the free church, the heart of the whole thing, is the promise of fidelity, a covenant, which each member freely makes upon joining. Actually, each member renews or renegotiates his or her promise many times in the course of the life of the church, in the privacy of renewed conscience or spiritual growth. Often, our promise or covenant is implicit, but not consciously explicit. It really doesn't matter whether it's verbalized. It matters whether it is faithfully meant. Our covenant is simply our promise that we shall seek truth together and support one another as we dare. To live by the truths we cannot help believing we have found at any particular time, and to support one another in doubt in those times when we can't find or can't decide what the relevant truth is. The Free Church is held together by the spirit of this promise. There is a recognizable spirit of the Free Church. It is the spirit of persuasion. It is both free and freeing. In the spirit of the covenant of persuasion, as individuals together, we heed our call to listen and to speak to one another faithfully, so that singly and together we may follow what we are persuaded are better ways. The spirit of persuasion is the spirit of a free religious people. It is holy to us. It holds all together insofar as we live by it, in the embrace of the Free Church. In the generous embrace of people who are centered in ever-changing and responsively creative ways around a promise of fidelity together, to search for and dare to live by truth. What follows is an adaptation of the Covenant of the Pilgrims, written for the contemporary Unitarian Universalists, covenanted pilgrims yet, in a great religious tradition. We pledge to walk together in the ways of truth and affection, as best we know them now, or may learn them in days to come, that we and our children may be fulfilled, that we may speak to the world in words and actions of peace and goodwill.
I heard a story about a Unitarian Universalist who had gotten caught up in a theological debate with an evangelist who had come to her door. As the evangelist at the door proclaimed the one true faith, the woman stood in the doorway with her young daughter behind her and tried to explain the wide range of theological points of view that were welcome at her own Unitarian Universalist church. The evangelist turned to the little girl and said, "What do you think about all this, little girl?" And the little girl held up her hands in a little fish motion and said, "Your church has room for this many beliefs." And then she moved her hands farther apart in a big fish motion and said, "Our church has room for this many beliefs." As Unitarian Universalists, we hold a wide range of beliefs. We celebrate a variety of holidays, and we engage in a diversity of spiritual practices. Our beliefs are based on our reason, our experience, and our sense of what is right. Our celebrations are based on our cultural backgrounds or our sense that a particular metaphor speaks to us. Our spiritual practices are ways of intentionally and regularly focusing our attention, knowing ourselves and the world around us more deeply, and for each of us to help our own spirits get in touch with the spirit of life. Those spiritual practices are drawn from a variety of sources, including the meditation or prayer practices of the world religions or our own creativity. For Unitarian Universalists, all those beliefs, celebrations, and spiritual practices are grounded in our Unitarian Universalist religious practice. A definition I'm playing with is that religion is institutionalized spirituality. You can be spiritual alone, but to be religious, you need a religious community. I've heard people say that they are spiritual but not religious, and I don't doubt that possibility. I'm sure it is also possible to be religious without being spiritual, if that means that one is observant of the practices of a particular religious tradition without necessarily embracing the personal spiritual dimension. Using the definition that religion is institutionalized spirituality, religion connects spirituality to community and helps to embody beliefs in practice. Our religious practices are practices that nurture our communal spirit. I've been asked whether practicing our religion means that we get to keep trying until we get it right. And the more I've thought about it, the more I'm convinced that to keep trying over and over again until we get it right is exactly what practicing our religion is all about. In the dictionary, practicing one's religion is defined as observing or adhering to one's beliefs or ideals. Putting beliefs into practice is essential to religion, of course, but there's a static connotation to the usual meaning of practicing religion, an implication that once we've learned the set of actions that go with the set of beliefs, we're all set. I like the idea that we might practice our religion the way we might practice playing the piano. The fact that we need to practice doesn't mean we aren't any good at it. It means that we are good enough to recognize that we can do better. After all, the finest pianists spend many hours practicing on the piano because they are always learning to play, always striving to improve. In the same way, we can always be learning our religion, recognizing that we can do better. As we practice our religion, we can keep trying until we get it right, learning to embody our religion in the way we live our lives. The great Unitarian Universalist theologian James Luther Adams, a great institutionalist, said that church is a place where you get to practice what it means to be human. And that sounds right to me. Our Unitarian Universalist theology is a practical theology. It has been said that Unitarian Universalists believe in deeds, not creeds. What we do is more important than what we think. What we do is more important than what we say we do. Our belief statements are individual, not communal, in the form of credo, not creed. I believe, not we believe. Yet being a Unitarian Universalist does not mean you can believe anything you want. It means that you can believe what you must. You can believe what your experience and your conscience tell you to believe. You can believe what you believe. I would suggest that there are three essential Unitarian Universalist religious practices that provide the context for our various beliefs, celebrations, and spiritual practices. These three practices, which conveniently lend themselves to alliteration, are covenant, congregational polity, and conversation. Community is the basis for all three of these practices. And I'd suggest that coffee, which I've heard some people say forms the basis for our Unitarian Universalist communion, is really just a vehicle for conversation. So the first of the religious practices that I'd like to explore is covenant. Some years ago, an ad campaign asked, "Could you be a Unitarian Universalist without knowing it?" The idea, of course, was to invite people to try out and potentially join a Unitarian Universalist congregation. However, a strict constructionist, and I will admit that in many ways I am a strict constructionist Unitarian Universalist, a strict constructionist would answer that it is not possible to actually be a Unitarian Universalist without being a member of a Unitarian Universalist congregation. Of course, one can hold beliefs that are theologically Unitarian, that is, belief in the unity of the divine rather than in the Trinity of Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, or beliefs that are theologically Universalist, which historically meant belief in universal salvation, that all will go to heaven and none are destined to go to hell, without being a member of a Unitarian Universalist congregation. Nevertheless, to be a capital U Unitarian Universalist requires membership, and therefore participation. It means being part of an explicit or implicit covenant of belonging to a Unitarian Universalist congregation. We unite around a covenant of relationship that calls us to ways of being and doing together without restricting individual thought or expression. Our Unitarian Universalist congregations, too, are joined in a covenant of mutual trust and support, commonly known as the Seven Principles. One Unitarian Universalist minister has termed the articles of this covenant relational beliefs, as distinguished from theological beliefs. These relational beliefs have to do with how we are to relate with each other and the rest of the world around us. These relational beliefs are descriptive in origin rather than prescriptive. The statement of relational beliefs that we know today as the Seven Principles is the result of democratic process, voted on by the delegates to the UUA's General Assembly in 1984 and ratified in 1985 after several years of crafting and drafting by committees and task forces and individual congregations who labored long and hard to find words that would express the common values of Unitarian Universalists. Written into the UUA bylaws is a provision for reviewing those principles periodically. They were last reviewed in 2009, and the proposed revision was rejected by a very close margin. Currently, an eighth principle is under discussion. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by building a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. This proposed eighth principle, like the other seven, will be subject to debate and democratic process and would be voted on by delegates at a future General Assembly. In the meantime, some congregations are adopting the eighth principle as a congregational principle. The statement of principles of the Unitarian Universalist Association has an almost poetic power. And one of the reasons I heard for the rejection of the proposed 2009 revision was that it lacked poetry. Many individual Unitarian Universalists find the seven principles to be an accurate description of their own principles as well as a useful benchmark for behavior. Yet those principles are not a creedal statement. Our individual freedom of belief means that we as individuals do not think as we do because we are Unitarian Universalists. Rather, we are Unitarian Universalists because we think as we do, even as we are open to persuasion and learning and have freely entered into covenant together. I suggest that the second essential religious practice of Unitarian Universalists is congregational polity. There's a parallel between our approach to theology, which upholds individual freedom of belief, and our approach to polity, which holds that each congregation is autonomously governed. Unitarian Universalist historian Conrad Wright comments, when Unitarian Universalists identify the set of values they hold in common, they resort to high-level abstractions like freedom, reason, and tolerance. Yet the meaning of freedom, reason, and tolerance is revealed more clearly by the way people behave than by the generalizations they utter. So it is a fact of no small consequence, the historian tells us, that Unitarian Universalists stand in a tradition of congregational polity that is almost 4 centuries old, that they are much more conservative with respect to that polity, to the way they govern themselves, than they are with respect to doctrine, that they have been Congregationalist in polity much longer than they have been liberal in theology, that indeed their Congregationalism has proved to be more durable and adaptable to changing times than any of the doctrinal formulations, whether of God or human nature or human destiny, that dominate accounts of the history of liberal religion. Thus, meaning is revealed in behavior. Wright's words have echoed theologian James Luther Adams' pragmatic theory of meaning, which states that theology is meaningful only insofar as it affects actual practice. In other words, according to Adams, the question is, what difference to our practice and to our expectations will it make to believe this rather than that? In this sense, our practice of congregational polity is a manifestation of our Unitarian Universalist theology. Just as we are responsible for our own beliefs, we are responsible for our own governance. And the third essential religious practice of Unitarian Universalists is conversation. As Unitarian Universalists, we are united in a search for truth, rather than by a single truth with a capital T. There's a cartoon that shows a Unitarian Universalist at a crossroads. One arrow points to heaven. The other arrow points to a discussion about heaven. Of course, the Unitarian Universalist heads in the direction of the discussion about heaven. One of my former congregants suggests heaven for the climate and hell for the conversation. Conversation, including questioning as well as persuasion, including speaking as well as listening, is one of the essentials of our religious practice. It is important not only that we search for truth, it is also important that we find truths and share them and put them into practice in the world. We do not seek or expect to find just one truth or just one way of expressing the truth. Many of our questions do not have certain answers, and some of our questions have more than one answer. One prerequisite for being a Unitarian Universalist seems to be a certain level of comfort with ambiguity. Yet the goal of the search for truth must be to find truths we can live by, truths about the worth and dignity of human beings, truths about the universe we live in, and truths about the part we as human beings play in that universe. An ad campaign some years ago described Unitarian Universalism as the religion that puts its faith in you. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe in ourselves, in the human capacity to make a difference in the world. Yet we also believe in something greater than ourselves. We believe in our interdependence, in our relational individuality, and in the power of community. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe in putting our faith into practice in the world because belief becomes meaningful only through its embodiment in our actions. Our communal religious practices of covenant, congregational polity, and conversation ground our individual beliefs, celebrations, and spiritual practices, forming the center of our Unitarian Universalist faith. Covenant, congregational polity, and conversation are the tools that help us truly practice our faith in religious community. They are the tools that help us practice our faith. Our closing hymn is number 145, As Tranquil Streams. As we extinguish the chalice flame, may we carry its light in our hearts. And may we live our lives fully and creatively so that we may be a blessing to ourselves, to each other, and to all those whose lives we touch.